happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and Canada and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 274 on November 9th, 2022. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I'm the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana's state virtual school, and we seem to have lost Dr. Fryer, located on the fabulous University of Montana campus in beautiful University of Montana in Western Montana. But tonight, I am joining you from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where I am taking my first international vacation since the COVID time started. So late last week, I masked up with my beautiful wife. We hopped on a couple of airplanes. We had to kind of do trains, planes, and automobiles to get here because of late flights, but we finally arrived here, and we've been here for the last week in beautiful Montreal, a city that is beautiful in November. And I'd love to come back here when it's not cold in wintertime, because I'm sure it's that much more beautiful. But joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wes Fryer. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, Jason, I am well. I'm a little cable challenged, but I hopefully am being heard, and I will assure everyone that I will do my best to try and improve the audio and, whatever, the audio quality. We're at least our video is looking fancy tonight. So I am not coming to you from my aspirational North Carolina cabin. It's just the house, but we have switched around because we got a new couch on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't do any measuring before getting it, and it would not go in the previous office. So I'm in what was our daughter's bedroom, and we do not yet have any carpet in this room. So it is probably a bit, let's just say, not ideal as far as audio goes. But I'm hoping it will be passable to do tonight. And my iPhone's about to die, so full disclosure, I've got to text my child to say, hey, will you bring me a charger? Otherwise, I'm going to be looking at another camera. But we're not here to probably talk about cable blues. You have put, sir, a absolute record-breaking number of Google articles in tonight. So for people that may be the first-time listeners to the show, what are we up to tonight?
Well, we're going to take some articles that we have spotted on the internets over the past couple of weeks and try to provide some insight, hopefully to help teachers, educators, IT directors, school administrators, and other educational types maybe make sense of the fast evolving world. And tonight we have several topics for your consideration, including we're going to try to talk about Twitter without getting stuck in the muck, which is somewhat challenging to do. We also have some tech correction news, Apple news, Google news, which is starting to turn into a large number of links of interesting things going on at the Googles. Microsoft, environmental news, some miscellaneous news, some additional tech correction news. Looks like we had that in multiple places, and then some IoT and connectivity news. And we'll end tonight with our so-called Geeks of the Weeks. So, Dr. Fryer, is there a certain place you'd like to start us out tonight? I noticed that you set us up with several fresh links to deal with.
Oh my goodness. Well, when we miss a week or two, it really does become a fairly overwhelming link list. Let's start out with one that I actually put in the miscellaneous column. This is from The Verge on Halloween, October the 31st. This is a really fascinating article. Why the browser company's Darren Fisher thinks it's time to reinvent the browser. Excellent. Thank you. It is. I've been saved. So web browsers, as we've talked about on the show, are now pretty much Chrome and Chromium focused. Oh shoot, this isn't going to work. Because Microsoft used to have a separate engine that they were developing for Internet Explorer and then the Edge browser. Apple used to use Gecko, I think, or something, or maybe it was their own thing. There was another one called Gecko. Anyway, there's been different engines, but now Edge is based off of Chromium. So maybe it's just Safari and Chrome then. Is that right? I should know this. I think Safari is a different core.
Yeah, it's based on WebKit, and yes. So there's Firefox, there's Chrome. Well, no, is Firefox based on Google now? No, it's not. It's
maybe it is still different based on Gecko. I guess the big thing I know is that Microsoft's stopped trying to develop its own and is Chromium based. Dan Fisher is somebody who goes all the way back to the Netscape days. He had been, I think, developing for Mozilla. Then he went to Google. He was 16 years there at Chrome and Chrome OS. And then he left for a company called Neiffer, and then left Neiffer to join this company called the Browser Company. And he's working on Arc, which the article describes as, quote, one of the hottest new browsers on the market. We spend so much of our time in the web browser. It talks about the hoopla that Apple caused just in Safari on iOS when it moved the URL bar down to the bottom, which I've gotten used to now, and it's great. It's so much closer to your thumb, and it just makes a lot of sense. But people really push back whenever you have something that people are very familiar with. And so the article talks about this challenge of basically trying to redesign the browser from scratch, thinking about privacy, thinking about functionality, and all the different platforms and things like that have to be supported. And so Google and Chrome's market share is really built off of harvesting our data, and it's built on the attention economy. And so it's a big challenge to think about redesigning a browser, but I had never heard of Arc before. And if there's anybody that has if there's a person who has a lot of credibility and experience in web browsers, it's somebody like this that goes back to Netscape days. He hasn't worked for Apple for Safari, but he's hit all the other, well, I guess not Microsoft either. But anyway, with all of his extensive experience with Mozilla and Google, lots and lots of experience and expertise. And so I have not tried Arc, but this was my first introduction to it. And you can check it out by just going to arc.net. And it's an attempt to try and reinvent the browsing experience. So
yeah, totally. Well, and I hadn't heard of Arc either. But I just signed up for a preview, and it looks like if I have a university student email address, I might be able to get a little sooner. I'm glad there's someone working in the space. I will say that, I'm just looking at my browsers right now. I have, I'm actually working on a fresh install of Mac OS on my M1 MacBook Air, and I'm just looking, and I currently have 5 browsers installed: Chrome, Firefox. I have DuckDuckGo's privacy browser, which is what I do most of my just kind of regular surfing on because it's anonymous and private and pretty stable. Microsoft Edge, like you mentioned, based on Chromium, and then Safari, which is based on WebKit. And what I would say is that, part of my problem is that I have a hard time moving away from Chrome because of, in my perception, how much better it is than the other browsers, in part because I would set up just the way I want it with all the plugins I want it to have. Safari is supposed to be a dominant browser on the Apple platform, but to be frank about it, it doesn't have all the plugins that I use on a regular basis. And without those plugins, I lose out on key functionality of my workflow. So I'm hoping I'll sign up for Arc, and I'd be interested in a better browser. But the bottom line is that for those that are advanced users, like Dr. Fryer and myself, there are certain minimums it's going to have for power users to move, and basic users aren't going to move until power users move. That's the bottom line. So I'm excited that someone else is in the space, and it looks like with his extensive background, he knows a lot about what it takes to make a good browser.
Interestingly, if you use a school email, you can get almost instantaneous access within 10 minutes. So that's interesting too, that they're really focusing on schools, and they say they're currently in over 400 schools across 100 countries. So anyway, maybe we'll have a report here in another week or so what the Arc browser is like.
Awesome.
All right. Where to next, sir?
Yeah, let's dive into this Twitter stuff, and mostly because I'd love to have a conversation with you tonight, Wes, about alternatives to Twitter and whether it's people are going to jump or not. So we've talked about this a couple of times on the show, and if you're listening to this podcast, I am almost certain of the you know of the basics. The bottom line is that Elon Musk bid for Twitter. He then pulled his bid. He was then sued by the Twitter board, and a court was about to force him to buy it. And he decided to pay on his original price. And last week, he kind of stumbled into the Twitter offices as the new CEO. He immediately fired most of the top brass at Twitter, brought in his own people from his other companies, and then has fired half, 2/3. It's the number kind of jumps around depending on which article you're in, but got rid of a lot of staff there, and in some cases, whole departments were completely eliminated. And just some examples that are not per se from these articles, but for example, the leader of the accessibility department at Twitter, which if you are someone in any sort of e-learning world knows that accessibility is kind of a big deal, and it also doesn't happen on its own. You need thought and leadership to really double down on that, especially if you're developing platforms. That team was eliminated. I know that ERPs, employee resource programs, which many large Fortune 500 companies have. They're for things like LGBTQ communities or different ethnicities. A lot of them were eliminated as part of the process, but also a lot of people that advocated some of Twitter's feature sets over the years have been eliminated as well. And then I don't really know how the story has necessarily played out, but the verified process, which is something that has always been kind of cloaked in mystery. Verified is when Twitter does something extra to find out it's you, and then puts a blue check mark next to your name. And the idea behind this is that because of the ability to create an account pretty easily on there have been lots of parody accounts in the time of Twitter. I've been part of one or two of them themselves. Both of them were private efforts that were both very successful and very funny, but I will not disclose my secret identities. But they've been a part of humor that I've engaged in over the last couple of years as well. But that process has been considered by many people to be a little non-transparent, even though most political candidates can get easily verified. And I've applied for verification, but I don't meet one of the standard categories for verification. You're not verified, are you, Wes?
I am not, and I've applied as well. So
yeah.
not on Twitter, not on YouTube.
Yeah,
but it's pay to play now, so I guess I can be.
Yeah. So and then what's happened is that then Elon Musk, the new CEO, said, "Well, we're going to move verification to a pay-for service, but you're gonna have to pay $20 per month." And then people complained about that, and so he's now saying it's $8 a month. It was up for 24 hours and has been taken down already because there were several accounts, including some prominent politicians. For example, the governor of the state of Montana, Governor Greg Gianforte, who is on Twitter, relatively active on Twitter. He and his communication staff are active on Twitter. A fake Gianforte account went up yesterday and paid the $8 to get verified, and sure enough, check. There was a check on there, and I believe his regular account was also verified. And so the fake account called out the regular account, saying no impersonators, and it was a big mess. So the fake account's been somewhat taken down, but it kind of highlights that the paying of $8 a month doesn't really fix the verification problem. And then the other thing that's happened in the last 72 hours was that a bunch of celebrities late in the weekend changed their name to Elon Musk, or not their username or their handle, but their name, and sometimes copied some things from his profile. And he took down several of those accounts. One of them was from comedian Kathy Griffith, who then, after she was eliminated, logged on her late mother's account to let people know what had happened, and then that account got banned too. So it's been a big mess the last couple of days. Do you have any insights or thoughts? I mean, I have some bigger questions probably for a minute, but any initial reaction to this mess, Dr. Fryer?
Oh, so I'll share an article. I'd actually put this one down, I guess, under tech correction, which this is a fantastic article from Motherboard. It's from November 6th called Social Media is Dead. And the main takeaway that I have for here, they're saying that, before Elon, social media with, Zuckerberg and everything was just basically a dumpster fire, and it was having all these troubles. I live in a different Twitter. I live in and it's not completely different, but it's largely separated from the kind of thing that's described in this article, where if you just scroll through, all you're just going to see is a bunch of celebrities and posers and things that are algorithmically generated, which will cause you to doom scroll and just waste your life away and basically be worthless. And that is absolutely not the Twitter that I live in. We talked maybe a month or so ago about how you can turn the algorithm off, and so you can actually see latest tweets. I use Twitter lists almost exclusively. I sometimes look at my feed, but I am looking at lists every day, multiple times in Flipboard. And so Twitter is an essential part of my communication dashboard. I do not really find myself caught up in, so much of the drama that is happening. I think it's just really unfortunate. It seemed a bit surreal right before the election for all this to happen, right before our midterm elections in the United States. And, based on the limited amount of news I've taken in since last night, it doesn't seem like, hey, the election got thrown or something really, dramatic happened election-wise. I think that Elon Musk really, really likes attention. He oftentimes, just like when he, retweeted a conspiracy theory about Nancy Pelosi's husband's attack, and then that was deleted, he's really not interested in, verified information, the huge, I think, responsibility that comes with maintaining and owning a platform like Twitter, which is utilized by millions of people around the world and is an important part of our ecosystem. I do think it has an outsized amount of attention, but it's just lamentable, I guess. And so you mentioned, alternatives. I set up a Mastodon account a number of years ago. I think of all the different websites that I've looked at and I've tried. Like email, Mastodon is federated, so that means it can interoperate with different folks running different kinds of servers. It's not a perfect Twitter clone, but it's pretty good. And I guess my other thought is, man, I wish RSS readers would come back and Google Reader would come back. I still have Feedly, and I honestly have turned to that a little bit. I haven't been just really diving back into Mastodon, and I'm not. Mastodon, has a variety of different clients that you can utilize. And anyway, it's okay. But the thing is, so many people are on Twitter, right? And that's the same thing about Facebook. And so one of the biggest benefits of the whole environment is being able to stumble upon, serendipitously encounter links and ideas and resources that you just wouldn't have otherwise, because there are people that are pretty smart and are generous with their sharing, and they're using the platform. So I think that a lot of people and a lot of the mainstream media articles we're reading about this perhaps live in a different Twitter than some of us do in the educational Twitterverse. But I think it is a perilous situation. Obviously, Elon is a businessman and fancies himself, and he's successful. It fancies himself as a mastermind who can be smarter than a lot of people and get this figured out. But the content moderation demands of a social media platform are really, really formidable. And I'm glad that He Who Shall Not Be Named and some others were not, put back on the platform immediately, and some things were said that, there'll be policies in place. But so many people have been fired. It really is Elon, I think, who decides, what happens or what doesn't happen. So I've got my Mastodon account. I think I actually moved it up on my wesfryer.com/after page, thinking that, maybe there's more people that might look for that, but I'm not cross posting everything there. And, I don't know what the tipping point is. So maybe that's what I'll throw back to you. What would there be a tipping point you could imagine at this stage when you would leave Twitter? I can't tell you what that is right now.
Well, it's an important question, and I think, Wes, you are far and away one of the most tech savvy teachers I know, and the fact that you're ambivalent about the alternatives is really part of the problem. And I'm just thinking about, I've had a couple of friends and online colleagues that have posted links to other social media sites. I've signed up for maybe a half dozen of them in the last 2 or 3 weeks. MeWe comes to mind. Two that I can't remember the name. This tells you the problem, right? Like, all these are problematic for me, because the bottom line is, if no one else is there, there's no reason for me to go there and share content, right? But at the same time, I do think that some teachers are going to start getting off of Twitter. And you make an important point that I think is worth repeating, that part of this may just be that we need to teach people how to master Twitter, right? It's not just about leaving the platform, but you can really, really curate all the content that you want to see on there. And I do somewhat of the same thing, that I've had to unfollow, and I think in some cases block some people that I found some value to, or there's a value to me having a relationship with them via the social media platform, because of content that I found either distasteful or kind of outside my bounds of what I think is tasteful or legitimate in the modern era. But the bottom line is that advertising makes the world go round. And I do think the place is going to become a harder place to deal with. First of all, if I've seen several references in the mainstream tech media that they have fired key engineers from Twitter. That's problematic, right? Like, you don't have a platform of this magnitude with a worldwide reach and tens of millions of users, active users, without constantly monitoring the platform 24/7 and making sure you have redundancies after redundancies. And, if Twitter goes down for several hours every day, people will leave in droves. That I can say for absolute certain. I also think too that if they can't make money off of Twitter, he spent $60 billion on Twitter as a company, and it's privately owned. It's his private ownership, and then some of it's hawked to investors. But the bottom line is that Twitter wasn't set up to make $60 billion a year. It's a very long-term play to make money off of this deal. And a lot of people are criticizing that advertisers are leaving because users find things distasteful, but that's the truth, right? I mean, that for 30 years in the United States, people vote with their feet, and radio stations have been shut down because the content on it was not considered palatable to some members of an audience. And if that audience refuses to be a patron of your business because you are advertising on a viewpoint or a style that you find distasteful, that's kind of introduction to capitalism 101, right? That's not I don't think that's a free speech thing. That's a capitalism thing. That's what happens if people vote with their feet. And I think things get really complicated really quickly if what did Mr. Musk call it? That he doesn't want it to turn into an unregulated hellscape, was the term he used last week when dealing with advertisers. But he's also made claims that comedy is no longer banned on Twitter, and of course there's references to the word woke, which is turning to a bit of a trigger word to me, because that just tells me you're not really serious about wanting to debate some of these critical issues and have a meaningful discussion. But yeah, it's not good. And I will say that I'm in a couple of discussions. I help run some social media for some organizations, and also advise on social media strategy. I think we need to start knowing where to go. Not necessarily to pull away from Twitter, but if teachers if teachers in mass end up on one or two other platforms, for teacher focused nonprofits and for profits, plus people like me and Wes that, in our role, I guess we could call ourselves influencers a little bit. There's, if we want an audience to engage with, if teachers all end up going to this media channel or the other, I think it's also might help change it. So maybe there's nothing to pull from our discussion of this tonight, but it is really complicated, I think. And I think also it is going to challenge all of us in the way we engage with each other. And if Twitter turns into the hellscape that Mr. Musk is saying he's working against, that's problematic, I think, for teachers.
So it's fascinating how early adopter innovator teachers, we found each other before social media, and we had Web 2.0. We had blogs, we had RSS readers. We didn't have Twitter, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have YouTube. We found each other and we were listening to each other and interacting, and we were doing it on spaces that we controlled. We didn't necessarily own, because people would have free blogger sites and things like that. But many of us learned to create hosting accounts and WordPress and created sites. I really am interested, and there's a group that Alan Levine and some other folks have, the DS 106 group, that are a lot of higher ed, teacher ed people, really interested in self-hosting and people having their own space, planting their own flag, and having a blog and having a site where you can share content. I've been a bit dormant on my blog, not entirely, but I mean, for for years, I would post daily, and I would get someone to what is like guest blogging, if I was like not going to be posting and whatever. Things are so different. I interacted with Bernie Dodge this week from San Diego State University. He interestingly posted this week that he's submitted all the materials to become a citizen of Ireland. And I said, hey, have you blogged about that backstory? So, I haven't blogged in years. Facebook is my platform. And social media has definitely allowed things to become more frictionless and easier for us to share. And there is a benefit to that. But I think some of the articles that we've talked about and we've read, for the show, talk about the tech correction, really lament these unintended consequences that have happened when we have all tried to get on, quote unquote, the same platform, the same platforms globally. And I was one of the things I'll miss about Twitter if it goes away is literally archiving my thoughts, because I will search Twitter, for my user ID and then a word or a hashtag. And then I'll find these things. They're like breadcrumbs. It's Hansel and Gretel going through the forest, leaving the breadcrumbs that they can go back and get later. Twitter has become my social bookmarks. It has become the way that I live share conference content on the relatively now rare occasion, but hopefully increasingly frequent opportunity to be able to do live professional development. Rather than just write a blog post that I'm going to post later, it's exciting to share that with a hashtag, because you have the chance to reach more people, and you can also interact with folks and you can amplify their ideas. It's just a much richer experience. I think in this time, it is worth considering where we are sort of planting our flag, having a space to share ideas. Many who have had a blog, it may be dormant and really not active. I want to suggest that the dumpster fire which Facebook and Twitter have been politically, and in some cases, this is even worse when we talk about it's not in the English language. I'm thinking about the Rohingya minority in Myanmar, persecuted, and it was like one person I think that Facebook had, or something just obscenely ridiculous in terms of a low number of folks that spoke the language and could try and counter misinformation. There have been some horrific things that have happened in different places. with social media. And so I think that maybe this is a bit of a reckoning. This isn't a reckoning in the same way that what is the provision? Is it 320? There's the liability protection, clause in the Communications Act or whatever that we have. I don't know that we're going to have meaningful regulation in the United States that's going to help shape and change this. But maybe this is kind of wrecking. And what I'm saying is there could be some silver lining to this, because if the world isn't on Twitter, then some of the complaints that people have had about the ways it has been abused and weaponized, and then also some of the wellness issues that people have, et cetera. I don't know. People will obviously, I think, maybe not obviously, I think we'll go to other platforms. There's TikTok. But, it's also an opportunity for innovation and for entrepreneurs and to see what else is done. But this is very symptomatic of our information landscape overall, which is highly fractured and it's highly polluted. And so that's part of what makes it really difficult. And you're listing off several different, options in addition to Mastodon. I tweeted back on October 22nd, conservative social media competitor sites to Twitter and Facebook: Parler, Gitter, Truth Social, Gab. It's just a dime a dozen, I guess, that we're having all of these different sites. But if you've got ideas to share, I think it's still valuable to do that. We may not be able to share them in real time, and we may not all be on the same platform, but there's actually a lot of value that comes from curating your thoughts a little bit more than you can in 140 or 240 characters and sharing them that way. And so I don't know, maybe we'll have a renaissance of blogging and, other kinds of sites. I don't think we're just going to go back to that blogging world, but it does make you think a lot about where it is that you share things and how you interact with people. And I think that's an enduring opportunity, and I would even say need, that we have to be able to share things, go find stuff later, point to them, being able to give a link to somebody to get more information, and just this whole idea of the interactive web. So politically, I think it's very minimal. And if I was to peer into my crystal ball, I think President Trump probably will be put back on the platform. And I think that everything that Elon has basically shown from day one, just like I said, retweeting that conspiracy theory about Pelosi's husband, like, he's not taking seriously the responsibility that he has in owning and managing one of the most important information sharing platforms on the planet. And he's shown himself to, I think, be more interested in, basically shock value, getting attention, he's a troll himself, getting people upset and fired up about things. And then having an outsized influence. He was trying to give advice to Ukraine about how they were going to need to negotiate with Russia the other day, which caused some pretty inflamed responses from Ukrainian leaders. So it's almost like somebody in junior high is now running Twitter, and we're all going to suffer as a result of it. It doesn't mean it's going away tomorrow, but I don't really see any hopeful signs of it, improving considerably. And there are certainly ways that he could kill it. And there was an article, I don't have this when I was trying to go find it, but it was a piece that was basically, all the ways that Musk could kill Twitter. And I think that if he has sufficiently diminished the staff of Twitter, this is what this article was breaking down. Like, if they don't have the capacity to bring it back up when it goes down and something bad happens, that's going to obviously be incredibly harmful. But just on the moderation standpoint, there are so many bad actors that are attempting to utilize platforms for harm. Yeah. that even that, I think he had 7,000 people and he fired 3,500 of them or something like that. I think that's one of the lessons that we have from both Facebook and Twitter as of 2022 is it doesn't matter almost how many people you hire. You're not going to be able to stop all the content that's bad. You're not going to be able to quote unquote make it a completely safe and unobjectionable platform. there's going to be some terrible and horrific things that are going to happen. And so it's a very reasonable prediction to say we're going to have more terrible and horrific things happening on the platform. And until something, which I don't know what it is, comes about, I don't think there's any hope of it getting better. Is that
Yeah,
too pessimistic?
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's sad, but I don't know what else to say about it either, other than, I'm not leaving anytime soon. I'm not paying $8 for a fake check mark. Like that doesn't do anything per
But
se.
if you want your Twitter Plus, like top articles, you'll have to, right?
Well, yeah,
Is
because
that true?
that's the new offering, right?
Because I actually use that fairly frequently.
Yeah, in fact, now that you say that, I got that notification today about how Twitter Blue was going away, and that there was going to be an
Oh,
alternative.
so Blue will go away, and the verification, you'll have to get verified to have that.
I think so, or fake verified, right? It's essentially just a mark saying that you're paying for the service. But then also, I've heard from, or I think I've read that actual verification is not going away either. It'll just be a different colored check mark, and because and part of it is that Twitter has a vested interest, and in fact, I agreed with their decision strongly that they said that their priority for verification was those running for office and those in office, right? Because they want to make sure that Twitter was a legitimate platform for official channels of speech in regards to people in office or running for office. That's true around the world, right? The Pope, his channels are verified. Prime Minister of Great Britain, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of the United States, the Press Secretary of the President of the United States, all verified. People running for those offices, all verified, because there's a legitimate interest for all of us to know the difference between that and parody accounts or scam accounts. But the bottom line is that if he does, and I think one of these articles talked about how he mentioned that we plan on breaking things and moving fast. That's a throwback to Mark Zuckerberg, and move fast and break things was his notion early days of Facebook. But that's nice in an era where you're trying to build a platform from scratch, when you have an established platform that is in many ways the platform franqua, if you prefer, that it's where a lot of politics gets discussed. That's problematic too. So I don't know, weird times.
I don't have the podcast reference. I should go back to my my Pocket Casts history, but I've listened to some excellent critiques of just social media in general. And here is one of the things. This may have been one of the author interviews. I think that might have been what it was. It's not Today Explained. It's oh gosh, man, you know what? Getting old is just really hard. Especially when you're doing a live show, which actually relates to what I'm talking about here. What am I going to do? I'm going to open up my podcast and try to look at it. Ezra Klein of the New York Times has his Ezra Klein show. He interviewed on his show yesterday for elections. He had an author, and I haven't tweeted it yet, but he's a fiction author. They talk about this a little bit in terms of media literacy, and I've heard some other ones. There's a real difference, what they were talking about in that podcast, a real difference when you're being thoughtful and you're marinating on an idea and you're thinking about it and you're revising it and then you share it, versus the immediacy. And so there are some things about Twitter's design and then just about this immediacy of sharing globally that have some really negative consequences for us. I mean, I personally don't think it's great for us to, I don't know, current events. Hey, we had the telegraph, and suddenly, current events wasn't, a horse that could ride 20 miles in a day and whatever the person who rode the horse was going to come tell you, you literally had things moving at the speed of light over a telegraph wire. I'm thinking of Neil Postman and Marshall McLuhan and people who've talked about all the different media and medium. But I think that some of the real negativity that we're experiencing with the news cycle, with the way in which, we can end up really getting worked up over something that, in some cases it is really a big deal, but in some cases it's not. And I guess the distractibility and it's the amusing ourselves to death. That's a Postman book. Dynamic that kind of happens with social media, with hashtags, with the ways that things are pushed. And it's like, wait a minute, why is this headline news? So I think that in terms of democracy and governance, and sustainable self-government, I think that we need to find ways to not be so, if not controlled, directed and strongly influenced by the fringes and by extremists. And maybe if we have a reckoning of Twitter, do you remember? I'll throw this back to you. There was a term, and it's in our show notes from a past show, that talked about how many friends you could have. There was like some kind of a theory that somebody had about that.
Yeah, and it was like 99 or 90 or
Right.
I'm glad that both of us are just scrambling for words.
Okay, yeah, we'll go back and look at that. Folks, pretty soon you're going to have, 80-year-old Jason and Wes. Well, I remember back in the day.
Was it a Commodore
that
for Wes? Yeah.
They were lamenting, that we're talking about Google Plus and how they had tried to take that into consideration when they designed Google Plus, that we weren't really supposed to. I think that's the article. We're not supposed to talk this much, but it's saying that in the design of these platforms and these tools, it really goes against our psychology and the way we've evolutionarily developed as human beings. And so if there was a chance to redesign, that would be good, and we could take things into more consideration. But anyway, it just, right now we're fractured and polluted. Forecast tomorrow, fractured and polluted. I think that may be the show title, Fractured and Polluted. Sorry. Okay, so let's take it back to the classroom, because this is what we do sometimes. We'll spin on a rabbit hole. Folks, we have got to be helping students navigate this world. We had a little hike today with our family after school, and we're talking about curriculum and places here in North Carolina, in the district where my wife is. You can't read a book to your class unless a committee has vetted it. That includes a parent and a bunch of people, or if it's in the library. If it's already in the library, it's already been vetted. But if it's not in the library, you have to submit it to this committee, and it's going to review everything. We've got a lot of concern and hoopla, and we need to focus on curriculum. And I'm not saying we don't need vetted curriculum for students, but let's not tease ourselves to think that the approved curriculum is the only thing that students are going to be exposed to as far as their information. And as adults, we struggle with this. And I believe we really need to find ways to help students develop web and media literacy skills, being able to use frameworks like SIFT to stop, investigate the source, find trusted coverage, and trace to the original. Like, that's a great framework. And if you're not using that framework, you need another one. But I think it's a call for media literacy, and it's a call for, let's just not read Shakespeare. Let's just not read the traditional canon of literature, and try to tell ourselves that we're preparing students adequately for the present, much less the future. We need to be so many of our kids now are in TikTok and whatever else the social media platform du jour is going to be. You can be assured it's going to be something. We've got to be in there ourselves to a degree as educators, trying to wrap our heads around the dynamics of the platform and the medium. And we need to be in meaningful conversations with students where we're practicing developing the skills of literacy. So that's my media literacy stump that we frequently return to as well. But I think that's perhaps, it's not a bow to put on it, but it's definitely a call to action, because yes, the forecast is polluted and fractured, but that also should mean we're doing some things differently in the classroom, because you and I didn't grow up in a world that had quite as many sources of information and quite as much apparent pollution in our daily stream of data intake or whatever. I'm not saying that well, but
Well, we got through 3/4 of our show, Wes, and talked about a sum total of 6 links and 2 topics. So maybe we can evolve a little bit here to some of our more techie topics.
you've got to go to Google. I think you have 20 Google links. So
Yeah, that's probably true.
what are
So
the best? What are the best ones there?
let me
Well,
see.
or whatever. Where do you want to go?
Let me see if there's just a couple things that I can do. The first one is this is from 9 to 5 Google on October 27th. Luma Fusion video editor has come to Android and Chrome OS as development begins, and I think this is actually a reminder of an article we talked about earlier this year that talked about the coming of this particular software, but. The Luma Fusion is a very popular iOS video editing suite that is a lot of experts say is pretty close to a desktop experience on a Mac, for example, and it's going to be available on Chromebooks. And the beta of it is actually for sale for $19.99 right now. That seems like a lot of money, I know, to buy an Android app, but the retail price for this will be $30. And once you buy it in your account, you own it. So I've gone ahead and done so, and I did not have access to a Chromebook. I'm all Mac guy while I'm traveling abroad right now, so I have not had a chance to play with it yet. But just the other day, I was on a Chromebook and looked at. I wanted to edit a video, a quick video that I was going to include in on an email, and I used WeVideo, and I've actually right now I've got a monthly subscription to WeVideo, so it's no big deal to use that. But it would be really nice to have a suite available, via a Chrome, an Android app to do that. So I want to highlight that's an availability. And if you are a Chromebook, a set of Chromebook users in your district, and you've struggled with this and don't want to pay for WeVideo, the monthly fee, this might be an option for district looking to license what seems like a pretty robust system to edit video. Let's see another article that is actually very relevant to me right now. This is from Digital Trends of September 28th, but Google Lens has a new feature that looks straight out of a sci-fi movie. And the reason why I think this is funny is because this feature has been around for some time, but it's starting to evolve a little bit. But Lens now has further features that have auto translation in them, and we've talked about this a couple of times before. That this functionality was actually purchased by Google. This was 6 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, and then ultimately imported into the system, and now they're starting to reconfigure the apps again. But I've used it a couple of times. I'm in Montreal. Quebec is primarily a French-speaking part of Canada, and unlike other parts of Canada where they're very duolingual in that they have 2 languages, Quebec tends to be a little more focused on the French side of this. And as a matter of fact, I've used Google Lens a couple of times this week when I was looking at a French sign to try to figure out, for example, why a store is closed, or what the hours are, or a masking requirement in certain areas. So this is super cool technology. I think that of all the things that have the wow factor, auto translation through a screen is just something really special that Google is certainly pouring the marketing on, and I just love it as a strategy as a traveler. And I think anything that helps decrease mystery, right, is a wonderful tool and worthy of our time. And then a couple more quick things. This is quick.
How about the Google Photos one? If there where we can make movies or better movies with Google
Yeah,
Photos?
this one's been around for a couple months now, but I've had a chance to use it a couple of times now, and it's great. Google is keeps updating the app on Chromebooks that is the Photos app, and it's also broadly adding more functionality directly into the web-based Google Photos, which includes things like a better movie, a better adjustment for editing, and then also a movie maker, so that it's going to be not necessarily as robust as like an iMovie or even the light versions of Premiere or even Windows Movie Maker back in the day, but will be a web-based platform for doing this. All this functionality extends into a Chromebook, and I love all that they're adding into these features to make the Google platform more of a creator platform.
And that article says that Google is working to bring LumaFusion to Chrome OS. So LumaFusion as a video editing platform. I just saw last night in my Google Home app a lot of additional features. I registered for the public beta, or the preview, I guess it's called, of the next generation version. And those kind of things are exciting. I mean, I'm in the Home app every single day with home automation stuff that we've got going on. Google Photos is now my favorite place for sharing pictures. I still put things up on Flickr. I don't want it to go away. I've got, over 50 or 60,000 pictures archived there, but Google Photos and the way the AI works and the way I can share those albums on my Chromecast and use it as a picture frame. I'm really excited to see Google continuing to innovate. Frankly, this makes me excited for the Google conference, when they have that each year, because it's like Apple in the sense that there's a wide variety of products that can, if we're into those ecosystems, it can touch our lives both professionally and personally. But that's fantastic. I'm glad to see the continued innovation in the space with photos and videos, because honestly, I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces on the Chromebook. The last couple, 3 years, I was at a Chromebook one-to-one school. And so that we did have in the grade that I was in, sixth grade, a license, for WeVideo, but that needs to be core. Video is core to literacy and communication in the 21st century. So just like a Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Drawing, I think we need a video option. So we're not seeing that it's going to come into the Google Suite yet, but coming into Google Photos, and I think that is a great advancement, which will have an educational impact, possibly, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I want to point out one other article, and because I think this is an important public service announcement. This is from SlashGear, and they have SlashGear, authors at SlashGear have actually received some access earlier in October to some internal conversations going on at Google that mock the incognito mode. And the headline is, Chrome's incognito mode is the butt of jokes amongst Google employees, it seems. And it's a good reminder that many people don't understand what incognito window is. And so you may have been taught that you can open an incognito window, assuming your district has not turned that off. They're managing your Google browsers. A lot of districts turn off incognito window, although to be honest, I don't really know why, because in the end, depending on how your filtering and logging software is set up, it doesn't get you out of those requirements. But incognito window opens up a browser window that has no history, no background in it, and then so
you're not logged in.
You're not logged into anything, and then with once you're done with the window, you can close it, and then it goes away. That all the cookies you saved there, all the logins you saved there go away. I use incognito window. Well, if I'm helping out the help desk, I may use it 25 times in a day if I want to be able to mimic what things look like for a student, or log in a student account to be able to see what's going on. But a lot of people think that incognito windows hide what you're doing on the internet, and there in some ways it does, right? It doesn't go into your search history, for example, and theoretically you aren't tracked while you're in incognito window, except that you are, right? Like if your district is storing your web traffic based on your account or where you're logged in, that is going to go in somewhere. If you are being spied upon by someone out in the universe, again, probably highly unlikely, especially if you're working in schools, but not out of the realm of possibility. It can't prevent that. Your ISP can see where you go. Websites you log into can see where you go, because it will, once you log in, it will be associated with you. And there's plenty of security experts that think that even if in the end, you're in an incognito window. Google may have a pretty good idea who you are if you're out on Google properties, even if you're in an incognito window, because of the fingerprinting that happens with your activity on the web. So this is just a friendly reminder from your buddies, Wes and Jason, that don't do anything where you need to be hidden in an incognito window. And in fact, never surf for anything in your school district or on your school computer that in any way can be seen as unsavory, whether it's running your small business, or it's going to websites that might be seen unfavorably by others. That it just don't do that at school, right? And in fact, I know a lot of people that won't even sign on to their district's wireless network with their phone or their tablet, their personal phone, their personal tablet, because they just don't want the opportunity to be tracked. And it does, right? Like that's one of the things you need to be acutely aware of if you're a teacher, administrator, anyone that works in a school.
I taught about this week. I'm going to write a blog post hopefully soon about digital portfolios and how my kids have been creating digital portfolios in Google Sites. We've got student-led conferences the next 2 days, and all my kids have a little comment and a QR code that they and their parents can scan with a smartphone and go right to their portfolio. We just did a evaluation process where students used a Google form to evaluate their own portfolio and then their one of their classmates. And part of that process was opening an incognito window and viewing the site when you're not logged in. Because at this point, and this could change, and there are discussions that are going on about this, parents don't have a login to our school domain. So if parents are going to see this, it has to be a public page. That doesn't mean we're, putting that into Google for SEO indexing and all that kind of thing. But it was an eye opener for kids because some of them had put in a Google Drawing document instead of downloading it as an image and putting it in and then it's shared for viewability. It was a private, restricted Google Drawing document. When they looked at it, it looked fine. Oh my gosh, look at that. It's broken. GeoMaps the same way. You make a GeoMap. If you don't share it so anyone with a link can view it, it's looking nice in your Google Sites edited version, but it's not looking that way for other people. So when I talk to students about this, I talk to them about, is it true that, the technology department can still see where you're going? How about at home? Is it true that there are some people that have had security officials show up at their door because of web searches they've done for, terrorist groups or explosives or something like that? Yeah, it is true. And, probably have a few raised eyebrows. And I told him, I'm not telling you this because I want you to run around all day scared and fearful, but we're being surveilled all the time, constantly, by different groups and organizations. And I think it is important to know about that. That probably, hopefully we're going to all behave the same, whether we have the ring of invisibility or not. But, we know that accountability and perceptions affect people's behavior. So, we used to have lots of signs every time there was a camera that says, surveillance camera, in effect. I think we had the first one probably at our campus outside the IT office in my old school. And that sign was still on the door for quite a while. And that caused me to laugh because over time, this is at my previous school, we had well over 100 surveillance cameras all over campus. And we were not putting up little signs everywhere that says surveillance camera in use. It's a fact of life. So, good reminder. I think that I learned from the Security Now podcast about the ways that packets, a little bit more of insight into how packets work. And every single device that connects to the internet has a MAC address. That's not Macintosh. That's a machine ID. And so whether it's your cell phone or your iPad or your laptop or whatever it is, that is something that is on the header of every single packet that is sent out and then, sent out in pieces and then put back together in order at the other end. And that's how TCP/IP works. So yeah, there's a little geekiness there, but the bottom line is there are folks that draw lines between the dots of our web activity, using sometimes things like a social security number or a phone number or an email account, but sometimes I think they're using MAC addresses, and that's part of this opaque cloud of information, which I guess if we wanted to buy it, we could, because it's being sold by data brokers to the, not even the highest bidder, just to bidders that want to pay for it. But it is a piece of media literacy that is important to know. And if that's not part of your curriculum in some way, I mean, it's a good thing to talk about, because not everybody realizes the degree to which we're being surveilled and the importance of being aware of that and what those implications can be.
At some point, Wes, it might be interesting for the two of us maybe to see if we can buy our data somewhere. Just see what happens, right?
That's a fantastic idea. What a great media literacy case study that would be. You could even take that as a class, like in a class, we could, I don't know, there would be some privacy concerns about that, definitely, because, but on the other hand, it's like becoming aware of what's on the dark web, right? Yeah. It's out there, and some folks are getting it. So, wow. This reminds me of an article. I have this thread that's pinned on my Twitter right now, but I had a chance to hear a young college student named Emma Lemke present with TIP teachers. And TIP teachers are based out of the Pacific Northwest. It's TIP teachers on Twitter. They're the Teachers for an Informed Public, and it's a great media literacy organization that I got connected to at some point. But she had shared this article, which I actually hadn't put in. I'll drop this in both the chat, and I'll put it in our show notes. This is a Wired article from, get the date here, August 3rd. Kids are back in classrooms and laptops are still spying on them. So in the context of surveillance, there's a link in the chat. In the context of surveillance of EdTech, in this case, I think some, exceptions to the law, perhaps, that were made by organizations and groups because, of the pandemic and things that we needed to do. I think this is a pretty powerful article. And I've mentioned before on the show, really through the eyes of our, now 22-year-old daughter who's a senior in college, it is a bit alarming to see how surveillance technologies are being used to monitor students in different kinds, especially of distance learning, situations. She's been, doing this semester completely online. So again, are we aware of this? Do we care? Should we care? And if we do, what kind of advocacy do we want to do around this? And those were all topics that were being discussed in that webinar with TIP teachers.
Yeah, and that article calls out.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that article calls out a lot of vendors that I'm sure you will all if you've been working in EdTech in a while would all recognize. So that's an pretty important read.
Absolutely. Well, we have gone just a little over an hour tonight. Is there an article you would like to get before the Geeks of the Week? And I'm actually trying to take over the facilitator role. So let me grab my blanket here and step back.
Allow me. Just one article I want to point out, just because I thought it was pretty cool. There's a great article from The Independent on October 28th that talks about how there is a new solar panel technology that's actually a clear pane that looks like a clear pane of glass. And there's the article goes into a lot of implications of that, and also what other options might be. But imagine for a moment, windows in your house being replaced with solar panels. You don't see them because they're see-through, and that they're generating electricity. And they've talked about tons of options that might be really interesting ways to collect solar energy, including on automobiles, even computer screens or monitors that could be powered in part by the light in the ambient light around. And it's, in my opinion, we're not going fast enough here in the technology development to stay off some kind of disaster in the relatively near future. But it's these kind of technological developments I just love seeing, and I hope more innovation comes to the space pronto.
I've got to write the post soon, but I heard an employee of OpenAI speak at our school last week that really blew my mind. And among other things, he was talking about just how much electricity and power these vast supercomputers are taking. And how we're on a trajectory, not just because of that, but because of other factors of just really needing a lot of electricity on the planet. And anyway, there were some other things about artificial general intelligence and other things that he shared, which anyway, maybe I'll have a geek of the week soon where I'll share a little bit more about that. But it was kind of crazy. All right, I think sadly we should probably geek of the week it and get out of here.
Yeah. What is yours, sir?
All right, I'm going to do two fast ones and a amazing podcast that I totally recommend. Check-in generator. Not heard of this before. You can use, well, this is something like during the pandemic, but what's the most beautiful place near where you live? Name something you learned last week. You can turn on different filters if you want them to be practical, creative, or reflective. But for a team meeting or a class that you're going to have or a workshop. I thought that was really, really cool. Tony Vincent has created some different randomizing things like that for some workshops and stuff that I've seen him do, but that's pretty cool. This one was from yesterday. Shout out to Dr. Troy Hicks, who shared this on Twitter. Imagine that. Hadn't heard of this before. This is called Hack a Story Tools, and it reminds me of my website, Show with Media, which is trying to say, hey, you want to create an info pick or you want to create a digital story, here are tools that you can use. But this one sometimes has reviews, videos, multimedia, infographics, mapping, videos, photos, audio, mojo, data, verification, social media, VR, plugins, animation, just all these different things. And you'll find different tools. I thought that was a fantastic media tool. And my final one is an Angry Planet podcast. And it's actually a little hopeful, but it's just fascinating, Jason, from the Pacific Northwest standpoint of Idaho, Montana. It's an episode called The Second American Civil War is Not Coming. Angry Planet has been one of my favorite podcasts for quite a while in my Conspiracies and Culture Wars media literacy project. This was from October 22nd, and it was an interview with Daniel Walters, who's an investigative journalist at The Inlander, and he covers right-wing extremism, politics, a little pop culture. And there's a lot of references to essentially how there are folks in Idaho, parts of Montana, getting really upset about what people in California are doing, what's happening at Berkeley. And it talks about some of these social media dynamics that we've discussed where, we're getting really worked up over things that in a prior generation, we just wouldn't have cared about because it wasn't local and it wasn't on our news. But now sort of outlier fringe events are in some cases galvanizing constituencies to be really upset and to do things. And I really found it fascinating. But the good news is that as a journalist who's investigating these right-wing fringe groups, he doesn't think that we're about to have a civil war. So I thought that was positive because we've got a lot of dystopian discussion around, exactly where social media and political polarization are going to take us. So my overshare is now over. What about you, sir?
Well, I've got a pretty simple one, but it's a pretty great platform. This is an app that's available on both iOS and Android. It's called eBooks, EBOOX, and it is basically a universal ebook reader. And most of my reading, ebook wise, I do on the Kindle platform because that's where I'm most invested in the Amazon world. But I do come across often EPUBs and PDFs and free versions of books, and there's really thousands of sources for legit non-pirated ebooks. There's also plenty of pirated ebooks in the world too that you would come across, but the problem is you can get those on your Kindle, but it requires a little bit of hacking that some people may find either unsavory or just extra steps. And so if you've got access to various types of ebooks, whether purchased on a store or downloaded from one of the many sources available for legitimate free ebooks, this one reads them all. It's a Russian-based app. I find no fear in that because I've done a little bit of research in that, and you can actually sync up via Google Drive. You would have to get access to your Google Drive to do that. I don't need to do that, so I don't. But it's a really great ebook reader, and again, it's both on Android and iOS. It's ebooks.
Awesome.
Well, Wes, looks like we've hit an hour 10, so I think it's time for us to move along. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, I am still on Twitter at W Fryer, but I'm on Mastodon and other places too. You can go to wesfryer.com/after and get an exhaustive list of links. How about you?
I am also on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach, at least for the time being. And that's probably the best place to find me. You can also find out more information about me on LinkedIn and other type professional sites. But this here isn't about us. It's about all of us. It's the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast that broadcasts on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where I happen to be located tonight, and 7 p.m. Mountain Time when I am not located on the East Coast. If you would like to watch us live, please follow us on Twitter at EdTechSR, where we always broadcast a link out. Plus, we broadcast live on both YouTube and Facebook. If you can't join us live, although we wish you would sometime, feel free to find us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, or you can download our archive copies, MP3 copies at our website, edtechsr.com. You can find our links at edtechsr.com/links, or the archives are on Facebook or YouTube. Stay safe, stay savvy. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night, everybody.